What do you think of when someone says, I was abused? What's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm sure probably most people, a lot of questions pop into their head when they hear someone say, I was abused. That's why we're doing this discussion and this series on abuse. And I designed this series to be chronological. So I would encourage you to go back to video number 1 and start there and take the time to watch each video. If you start in on a video and it just is not piquing your interest, jump in on another one. But the whole series gives a lot of background information, the reasons why we're doing this series, the definition of abuse, what happens when the law gets involved, and things like that. And I'm telling you my story from first person experience of the abuse I suffered as a child, growing up in a home with a very codependent mother with undiagnosed potential bipolar disorder and depression, and a father who was narcissistic. And I just wrapped up the last couple of videos giving the background of my parents' childhoods. First, we started with my mom in video 11. We kind of carried over into video 12 with her a little bit, and then went into my dad. And then video number 13 and 14 gave a lot more information about my dad because he was the sole financial provider in the family. And I know a little bit more about his role in the home than I do about my mom. My mom was very nurturing as a mother, so there wasn't a whole lot of problem there, but she was extremely volatile and her mood swings were black and white, and we suffered as children walking on broken glass with both my parents. And it was not a really peaceful childhood. It wasn't really loving. It was very, very chaotic and full of anxiety, fear, tension, competition, jealousy, anger, fights, you name it. And so thank you for joining me today. My name is Ann from Home Wellness with Ann, and I, if you can't tell, have wet hair. I just got out of the shower because it is very humid where I live, and I went for a long hike and came back and was nasty. So I needed to get cleaned up before I filmed this video. Number 15 in the series on abuse. Thanks so much for joining, and let's get started. So my parents together, as I've mentioned, were the king and queen of hypocrisy together. Like growing up as children, they were always do as I say, not as I do. So by way of an example, with my mom at least, when I was in 4th grade, I think it was 4th or 5th grade, right about the time I started to become aware that there was something going on in my own home and that my parents weren't getting along. There was this transition period between the ages of 8 and 10 with me, and then I was fully knew there was something wrong by the time I reached the age of 12 or 13. But in those early years, I still kind of was friends with my mom. That's what she called me. I looked to her as my mom to help advise me, teach me how to be a woman and stuff like that. And my mom being unwell, when we were younger, I believe that she probably did try to do the best she could, but and she did give me this sage piece of wisdom. But here's where it gets interesting. In 4th grade, right about 4th grade, 5th grade, maybe, I was having trouble with one of the girls from school. Her name was Wendy. And we wound up going to all our schools together from kindergarten through graduation in 12th grade. And I haven't seen her since graduation, years and years and years ago. And this girl back in grade school had it in for me for some reason. She just hated me. And me being the person I was, not liking conflict or wanting conflict and not really ever having been taught how to stand up for myself, didn't understand why she was picking on me, why she had it in for me. It was miserable, as most girls experience around that age, junior high and maybe a little bit earlier. There's a lot of backstabbing and clickiness and gossip and things like that happen with girls. It's just nonsense. And so I went crying to my mom and said, Wendy's hurting me. I don't understand why she doesn't like me. And my mom comforted me and did the lovely things that she did when I was younger. and was kind and supportive towards me and said, rubbed my back and said, I know it's tough. I know it hurts now. There must be something really bad going on in Wendy's home that we know nothing about, but I would encourage you not to talk about her badly to anybody else. Just continue being nice to her and just turn the other cheek. And of course, talking about it with my mom instantly made me feel better. But later on, I found out, probably after several months of dealing with Wendy and then shedding a lot of tears and having lots of conversations with my mother, I found out that Wendy's dad had committed suicide in their garage. And so, yes, I think that very much so, when someone is dealing with something horribly in their home life and you don't necessarily know about it, they are going to in turn treat you bad. Now, that's not to excuse their treatment, but clearly it's a cry for help. And that's not even what we're talking about. That's not even why I tell that story, but it's a good story because my heart went out to Wendy. And she, I think once she grieved the loss of her dad, she actually did a complete 180. And by 6th grade, I think, she was just a classmate. I don't remember any fights with her or being picked on by her or anything. It's like she healed. She got the help she needed, or perhaps her mom got the family the help they needed. So kudos, bravo. But anyway, that is actually the story that I'm going to tell regarding my parents' hypocrisy. And it's a demonstration of my mom's hypocrisy because she went through a great deal of consultation and talks with me and advice and telling me not to talk badly about others. But then my mom would turn around on Sunday morning and she would berate and chastise and judge every single other woman in the church, primarily women who she was intimidated by, women that she felt were prettier than her or who had more attentive husbands or anything like that, had better clothes than her. If someone had their hair done, if someone wore a dress to church, if they, if their husband held their hand, the wife's hand, my mom would sit there and her hair is, puffed up or too fancy, or shoes are high heels, or, oh, it's a show and tell. And that is what my mom was teaching me. I never understood it. I picked up on it right away, and I still wasn't the type of person that would trash or berate or judge people behind their back. I knew and recognized very early that here my mom was saying, don't talk bad about other people, don't put them down and all this other stuff, and trying to make me feel better in 4th grade. But then on, that'd be on Friday. And then on Sunday, she'd go to church and be something totally different. Is do as I say, not as I do. Now, that was my mom. And that's just an example. She was like that with a lot of things, hypocritical. My dad was also very hypocritical. He was always telling us kids to be ourselves and stand up to the crowd and don't be followers, be leaders. But the moment we expressed our own individuality or uniqueness, down came the condemnation and the judgment from him. As long as our opinions aligned with his, we were approved, accepted, excused, and all that other stuff. In fact, we would be vehemently defended and supported, and we'd get he would be interested in us and ask us questions. But my oh my, if you had an independent thought or something that went a little bit left or a little bit right from his opinion, oh hell, there'd be hell to pay. There was no curiosity, there was no interest in it. It didn't matter. He wouldn't even try to understand why we had our opinions that were different from his. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that we were different, therefore we were wrong. So, and that was throughout my childhood. So my parents were the king and queen of hypocrisy. When it came to my parents, one of the big differences in their style of parenting was the level of self-sacrifice that my parents gave. My mom sacrificed a lot for us kids. Sacrificed her time, her energy, sleep, you name it. She did a lot for us growing up. I say a lot very loosely. My mom was mentally unwell and very unstable, but she sacrificed and she gave, and she went above and beyond for her children and for the home. But my dad never did. The home revolved around my dad. My dad liked to say, and still to this day likes to say, that he was working for us, for the family, but none of us ever asked him to do what he did. We wanted him home with us. We wanted him involved in the family. We wanted to go places and do things and talk and play. But it was all for us. I'm sure probably many of you can relate to that. And honestly, a lot of guff that I get, a lot of guilt that I feel, is because I had two parents in my home growing up. And that still doesn't justify, I mean, yes, I feel blessed. Yes, I feel grateful, but it wasn't a healthy home. It doesn't mean that I got a get out of jail free card just because I had two parents. It was a childhood of chaos and stress and anxiety and negligent. Like, I felt love from my mom, physical and emotional. Like, she cared for us and she tended to us and saw to our needs. But she was unstable, and she was manipulative and controlling herself, tried to get control a lot of the times. The entire household operated around my dad and his schedule, his needs, his wants, his comforts, his conveniences. But the interesting thing is, my dad ran his own business. By the time I believe I was 6 or 7, he had his own business, and he set the rules, set his schedule, and so on and so forth. So he could manipulate the rules and change the hours and the schedule for his business, or hire another person, or, to help him, or any number of things. But no, because of him, because of the business, the entire household ran around him. Sorry, I think I've got some bug bites while I was out on my hike, but it's itching. So anyway, disregard me futzing and fidgeting. So one example, this is something that just drove me nuts in my childhood. When we were growing up during the school year, we were not allowed to shower in the morning. Now, as little kids, it was not a big deal. You take baths at night, you wake up fresh, mom combs the hair, sprays a little conditioner, combs out the snarls, brushes the teeth, throws a bowl of cereal or yogurt in front of you, and you're good to go, right? But we had one bathroom, 8 people, 6 people in school at the same time. And even as teenagers, there was my oldest brother, my second oldest brother, me, and then there was 4 years, there's a gap, and then my sister and my 2 younger brothers. Even as teenagers, the 3 older siblings still couldn't shower in the morning, because apparently it was vital throughout my entire childhood that my dad promptly leave for work at 7:35 in the morning. Again, even though he owned his own business, set the schedule, set the hours, set the rules. So he was on a tight schedule. Now, in my head, as an adult, as a caretaker of my family and a partner with my husband and caring for our kids and stuff like that, there's compromise and stuff that you do, as far as I know. And I can't understand why my dad couldn't adjust his schedule 15 minutes or 10 minutes or anything to allow us to rotate mornings, who got to shower on Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, And because my 2 older brothers were, obviously boys, and I was the only teenage girl, it was miserable. Because being a teenage girl, and I don't want to sound sexist here, hopefully you guys get what I'm trying to say here. A teenage girl has a lot more maintenance in the morning when she gets up, and a lot more maintenance, period, in the bathroom. You don't just run in the bathroom, pee, and get out. There's a lot more involved, and it takes time, and you have to get yourself clean. It was miserable being the oldest girl in my house growing up, of the 3, teenagers too. So my dad was the only one allowed to shower in the morning. He would promptly get up at 6:30, be out of the bathroom by 7, and we each had 10 minutes in the bathroom. So like from 7 to 7:30, my 2 oldest brother each got 10 minutes, and I got 10 minutes. And then the other 3 younger kids would be basically, my mom would be washing their face out in the kitchen and brushing their teeth and running a comb through the hair because they were still little. but we could never shower in the morning. And when I hit puberty, this was impossible for me. It was miserable. I could never look fresh and smell good in the morning. I could never go to school feeling good about myself when I was a teenager. I think maybe 5% of the time I went to school feeling good about myself, feeling clean, feeling fresh, feeling, stylish, feeling well kept, well groomed, because there were occasions when I would wash my hair in the sink in the kitchen in the morning, because that was the only way I could freshen myself up. I'd get my 10 minutes in the bathroom, and then while someone else was in the bathroom, I could wash my hair in the sink. But that wasn't a guaranteed thing. We had a hot water tank that was maybe 50 gallons or something like that. It was not enough for 8 people, much less my dad to get through the shower, and then 3 teenagers, and then, you get what I'm trying to say here. So my mom may even need the sink to, cook or do dishes for us in the morning. Like, the sink wasn't always available for me to wash my hair in the morning. So morning routine during the school year growing up in my home was absolutely miserable. And that is an understatement. I hated morning routine during the school year when I was growing up. It just stunk. Nearly every day, too, there was some sort of argument or fight or some sort of chaos. Running late, missing the bus, wrong clothes, mismatched shoes, can't find socks. I mean, it was miserable. And of course, my dad promptly had to leave at 7:35, so he wasn't there when the bus came at 7:50 to pick us all up. My dad was gone from work, so he didn't have to worry about it. My mom wound up having to take care of everything for us in the morning. Feed us, clothe us, make sure we got on the bus on time. Now, granted, she was a stay-at-home mom, but there were 6 kids all in school at once, and he owned his own business. And again, going back to compromise, seriously, now I look back and I'm like, man. And I hated it. The start to almost every school day growing up was miserable. So, I would get up in the morning and I would go to school. So 200 and however many days a year throughout my childhood, every year, 200 and some days would start out miserable, stressful, anxiety. Not like I would start my day as a young person just unhappy. Like never feeling really good about myself because I didn't feel clean. I didn't feel fresh. I didn't feel pretty. I didn't feel confident. I didn't have help. I had to scramble. I may not have clean clothes. My mom worked very hard on laundry. I don't mean that, but sometimes clothes wouldn't fit, or they'd be worn, or there'd be a stain or a tear that I didn't know about, or, things like that. Not my mom's fault. I'm just saying that I'll tell you what, school growing up, getting out the door was horrible. So that was what it was like for me growing up, going to school every day. It started out horribly. And so my dad, since he worked 6 or 7 days a week, Sundays were a day of rest. And it was the only day that the family had together, but we never did anything. After we went to church on Sunday morning, we came home and my mom cooked a big hot breakfast. And then the rest of the day, it was football and news for my dad and sitting in his recliner reading the newspaper, while the rest of us just kind of scattered and played. And we never did anything as a family. I mean, throughout my entire childhood, there may have been a handful of times on a Sunday where we might have done something. I don't recollect what that might have been. Every single Sunday was football, and Dad was glued to the TV. I mean, he was glued to the TV in the evening watching the news and then sitcoms, and then he'd be glued to the TV watching football on Sunday. And so we really did not get a whole lot of time with my dad at all growing up. Sunday was the only day that we could all be together. I wish we could have had a family game. I wish we could have went on picnics, to the beach, to the park, on a hike, bike ride, drives, sightseeing tours, anything like that. Like I said, there were a couple of times I remember we might have done something, but I really, that wasn't the norm. It was the exception. And I have very little recollection of that. I think when I was really little, we went to my grandparents' cabin a couple of times, but then that got to be too expensive and too much with so many kids, and so it just didn't happen, you know. And I understand that my dad was tired after working all week, but I will say that in therapy, I learned about myself, because I remember expressing to my counselor that sometimes I'm too tired when I get home from work to sit on the floor and play with my 8-year-old son, who's now 10. And my counselor said to me, so this is a licensed counselor who said, you have to find the energy and something to do with your child to bond with him, even when you're tired. And it's true. As a parent, that's our job, to love our children and to spend time with them and show them that they matter. And that was my dad's job. My dad could have used that advice when we were growing up. Anything would have helped, I think, anything to bring us together as a family, honestly, as siblings, as, you know, parent-child relationships, just to bring us together. It was a competition from the start with us. Who could be the superior child? Who could be the most approved, the most successful, the strongest? It was essentially survival of the fittest. And that was my family, and that was my family leadership growing up. And I thought our family was normal. I thought everybody's family was like this. I even struggled in the early days of counseling. It took me a very long time to accept, to first of all realize, and second of all to accept that the home I grew up in and the family I have is not okay. It's not healthy. It was a very difficult concept for me to accept, to realize and accept and admit out loud. It's been a whole nother issue to admit that I was abused. I grew up not having the slightest clue who I was as a person or what I was about. The truth is, I was raised in a very unstable home with lots and lots of physical, emotional, mental volatility, with abandonment, neglect, and with trauma. For me personally, as an introvert, as an empath, I was traumatized. I was afraid all the time that something bad was going to happen, all the time in various situations. I had no clue what a healthy relationship looked like amongst siblings, amongst friends, amongst married couples, amongst two adults that were not married, amongst boyfriends and girlfriends, or any kind of relationship. I never saw a healthy relationship demonstrated. I had no clue. My parents did love me. I don't doubt that for a minute, as they loved all my siblings in the only way that they knew how. But it was not a loving relationship, and we didn't grow up in a loving home. Sometimes love is not enough. Loving someone may not be enough. And you probably may already know that. You may have already learned that in life, or you may already be kind of on the verge of learning that in your own life. As I've learned in therapy, you can love someone and they can love you, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be a good pair for an intimate relationship with each other. Similarly, when we sit here and talk about abuse, the same is true. Someone can unintentionally, here we go again with an intentional word, go back and watch the first few videos in this series to get a glimpse of what we were talking about with the word intentional. Someone can unintentionally still abuse someone, whether they love the person or not, whether intent is present, whether the indicators of abuse are there or not. Love and intent are not excuses or reasons for poor behavior and unkind behavior, disrespectful behavior and hurtful behavior. It shouldn't and doesn't matter whether someone loves you or whether they intend to hurt you. But that was the leadership we had when we were growing up. That's the leadership we received from my parents. Yes, we were loved. Yes, we were provided for financially. My mom was nurturing to us, but what was missing? Was what we received enough? In my opinion, no, it wasn't. It wasn't even healthy. In fact, it was very harmful. And all 6 of us kids as adults are proof of what we lacked in childhood and the negative things that we were recipients of. Well, hopefully, except for me now on my healthy journey. So that was our home growing up. Yes, we did have some very good times, and I have very good memories of my youth and my younger years. Running around the neighborhood and playing with other kids, building forts, sitting on my dad's lap to read. I think I just remember my sister sitting on his lap, my mom going out of her mind to make Christmas special for us, baking till the cows came home, baking huge platters of goodies for all of us, listening to Christmas music nonstop for several weeks leading up to Christmas, decorating the house like you would not believe, and shopping and wrapping everything and doing the stockings. And my mom was, in my opinion, a little superhero when we were kids. We do have bright spots. I have bright memories from my younger years and some scattered throughout my teen years. It wasn't all bad, but percentage wise, I would say it was probably, once I hit about 12 or 13, about 75% of those years from 12, 13 through the time I moved out of my house. About 75% of that time was anxiety ridden and chaos and stress and fights and angst, and the 20% was probably okay. 5% was probably really good times. I'm just giving you the reality of how things were when I was growing up from my perspective. In video number 16, which is coming up next, I'll get into a little bit more of the not so good things that were the norm of my childhood that focus on the relationships with my siblings. Now you have the overview of like my parents and what the household was like growing up, and the tension and the anxiety we had and the fights. Now in video number 16, we're going to get into very specific stories and examples of things that I remember, things that happened to me, things I witnessed that were traumatic for me, absolutely traumatic. Thank you so much for joining Whole Wellness with Ann. I hope this is relevant and helpful to you. Please chime in, give me some feedback. Let me know what you want to hear a little bit more about or what you have questions on. And by all means, take care of you. Thank you so much for joining me on Whole Wellness with Ann.